The abandoned military facility in Nevada's high desert held secrets that were never meant to escape. Now, 40 miles from Las Vegas, those secrets had 4 legs, razor-sharp fangs, and the intelligence of 3 men combined. Project Cerberus, a genetically enhanced German shepherd, had broken free from containment, leaving a trail of destruction that had the National Guard stumped and the CDC terrified. Sarah Mitchell watched the news footage from her tiny apartment, her coffee growing cold as familiar dread crept up her spine. She recognized the tactical movements, the calculated aggression. This wasn't just any enhanced canine. The military brass didn't know what Sarah knew, that some dogs could be reached through channels science hadn't yet discovered. 20 years ago, she'd walked away from her military career after an incident that left her questioning everything she understood about the bond between human and canine. She'd buried her gifts, sworn never to use them again. But now innocent people were dying, and she was the only one who understood the language this creature truly spoke. Could she risk exposing the telepathic connection that had once made her the military's most successful canine handler? The news anchor's voice droned on about evacuation zones and military protocols, but Sarah's attention fixed on the helicopter footage. There, a flash of dark fur moving through the desert scrub with impossible speed and precision. The way it avoided the search teams wasn't random. It was strategic, intelligent, angry. Her hands trembled as memories she'd spent 2 decades suppressing flooded back. The whispers in her mind that weren't her own thoughts. The way military dogs would calm at her approach, their eyes reflecting an understanding that went beyond training. The final mission that had shattered everything she believed about the limits of consciousness. Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miss Mitchell?" The voice was crisp, authoritative, military. "This is Colonel Harrison, Department of Enhanced Defense Projects. We need to talk." Her blood went cold. "I think you have the wrong number." Former Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, K9 Unit 447. Specialized in behavioral modification and canine psychology. 23 successful missions before your discharge in 2003. A pause. "We know about Kabul." The phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Kabul. The mission that ended everything. The IED that should have killed her entire unit, except Rex, her partner, her closest friend, had known it was there 30 seconds before it detonated. Not because he smelled explosives, because Sarah had felt his terror through their connection and understood the warning he couldn't speak. "What do you want?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Cerberus has killed 4 people in the last 12 hours. Our psych team believes he's experiencing what they call enhanced psychological trauma. Traditional tranquilizers don't work. His metabolism burns through them too quickly. Lethal force has been ineffective." Sarah's mind raced. What kind of enhancements? Classified. But I can tell you that intelligence amplification was a primary focus. Problem is, when you make something 3 times smarter, you also make its emotional responses 3 times more complex, 3 times more unpredictable. Through her apartment window, Sarah could see the distant mountains where Cerberus was loose. Even from here, she felt something, a faint echo of rage and confusion that made her temples throb. It was impossible, the distance was too great. But then again, she'd thought her abilities had died with Rex. "Why call me? I've been out of the game for 20 years. "Because your service record shows success rates that our current handlers can't explain. Dogs that were written off as untrainable became model soldiers under your guidance. Your methods were unconventional." Unconventional, that was one way to put it. Another way was to say she'd violated the fundamental laws of neuroscience and psychology, reaching into minds that shouldn't have been reachable. "I can't help you," Sarah said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt the lie burning her throat. "Cerberus is moving toward populated areas. By our calculations, he'll reach the outskirts of Henderson by tomorrow morning. 30,000 people live there, Miss Mitchell. 30,000 people who don't have enhanced reflexes or tactical training. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel what she'd been blocking since the first news report. There, distant but growing stronger, waves of confusion, betrayal, and crushing loneliness. Cerberus wasn't just a weapon that had malfunctioned. He was a thinking, feeling being who had been created for one purpose and then abandoned when that purpose became inconvenient. Just like she had been. "Send me the files," Sarah said quietly. "All of them. I want to know exactly what you did to him." "Ms. Mitchell and Colonel?" Sarah's voice hardened. "If you're lying to me about any of this, if this is some kind of test or recruitment scheme, I'll make sure Cerberus isn't your only problem." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Harrison spoke again, his tone had shifted to something approaching respect. "Files will be delivered within the hour. And Ms. Mitchell? Thank you." Sarah hung up and stared at the television screen where emergency vehicles raced through empty desert roads. Somewhere out there, an enhanced mind was crying out in frequencies only she could hear. 20 years of silence were about to end. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Maya kept her hands wrapped around the ceramic mug anyway. The familiar weight grounded her as she stared out the rain-streaked window of her small apartment, watching emergency vehicles streak past with their lights painting the darkness in urgent reds and blues. The local news had been cycling the same footage for the past 3 hours, shaky cell phone videos of something massive moving through the shadows, the screams of terrified civilians, and the grim faces of officials who clearly had no idea what they were dealing with. She recognized the signs immediately. The way the creature moved with predatory intelligence, the surgical precision of its attacks on only armed personnel, the complete ineffectiveness of standard containment protocols. This wasn't some rabid animal or escaped zoo specimen. This was military grade. Maya's phone buzzed against the coffee table, and she glanced at the caller ID with a mixture of dread and inevitability. Colonel Harrison. She'd been expecting this call since the first news report, even though she'd been officially discharged from the enhanced canine program 18 months ago, under circumstances that both parties preferred to keep classified. Rodriguez. She kept her voice steady, professional. "Maya, we need you." Harrison's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd run out of conventional options. "I know you said you were done, but this thing, it's one of ours." She closed her eyes, feeling the familiar ache behind her temples that meant her mental barriers were under stress. Which generation? Project Cerberus. Third iteration. The words hit her like a physical blow. Third generation meant full neural enhancement, augmented aggression protocols, and worst of all, rudimentary telepathic resistance conditioning. They'd been trying to create animals that couldn't be mentally influenced by enemy psychics, never realizing they were making them nearly impossible for friendly telepaths to reach as well. "What's his designation?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "Operative K7. Code name Ajax." Maya's breath caught. Ajax. She remembered him from the early trials, back when he was still young enough to play before the full conditioning had locked his mind behind walls of engineered paranoia and aggression. She'd been his primary handler for 6 months before the program directors decided her unconventional methods were producing results they couldn't adequately explain or replicate. What happened to his current handler? The pause on Harrison's end told her everything. Martinez didn't make it, along with 3 other specialists and 2 civilians. The thing is smart, Maya. It's not just killing randomly. It's targeting anyone it perceives as a threat, and right now that seems to be anyone in uniform or carrying a weapon. Through the window, she watched another convoy of military vehicles racing toward downtown. Standard protocol would be to establish a perimeter, use tranquilizers, maybe bring in animal control specialists who had no idea what they were actually facing. Ajax would cut through them like tissue paper. "I'm not active duty anymore, Colonel. I can't just..." "I'm not asking you to re-enlist. I'm asking you to save lives." His voice dropped to something almost pleading. "Whatever happened between you and the program, whatever made you walk away, we can deal with that later. Right now, you're the only person who ever successfully managed one of these things without breaking them first." Maya stood and walked to her bedroom, pulling open the drawer she hadn't touched in over a year. Inside, wrapped in an old tactical vest, were the tools of her former trade, specialized collars, signal transmitters, and a small case containing syringes filled with experimental sedatives designed specifically for enhanced canine units. Her fingers traced the edge of the case as memories threatened to break through her carefully maintained mental barriers. The real reason she'd left the program wasn't in any official report. The directors had attributed her success to intuition and exceptional observational skills, never suspecting the truth. Maya was a telepath, and she'd been using her abilities to form neural bridges with the enhanced animals, calming their augmented aggression and helping them focus their training. It had worked perfectly until the day she'd connected with a Cerberus prototype and experienced its memories of the laboratory procedures that had created it. The screaming had lasted for hours. "Maya, you still there?" She picked up one of the sedative injectors, feeling its familiar weight. "What's your perimeter situation?" "We've got 6 blocks cordoned off in the warehouse district. Local PD is handling civilian evacuation, but this thing keeps moving. It's like it knows exactly where our people are positioned." Of course it did. Enhanced K9 units were trained to track humans by scent, sound, and electromagnetic signatures from a distance that would make a bloodhound weep with envy. Ajax wasn't just running wild, he was hunting. "I'll need access to his full conditioning file and 30 minutes alone with him once you corner him. Maya, the insurance liability alone." "Those are my terms, Colonel. Take them or keep watching your people die." Another long pause. "Then we'll have a transport at your location in 10 minutes. Maya was already reaching for her jacket, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode, even as a deeper part of her began preparing for the most dangerous connection she'd ever attempted. The morning briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Director Hayes pulled up satellite footage on the main screen. Sarah sat in the back row, trying to make herself invisible while military personnel and CDC officials filled the seats around her. The enhanced dog, designation K-47, call sign Cerberus, had been on the loose for 36 hours now. 3 more incidents overnight, Hayes announced, his voice cutting through the murmur. A family camping near Cascade Falls reported their vehicle destroyed. No casualties this time, but the pattern is escalating. Sarah studied the thermal imaging footage as it played. The creature moved through the forest with inhuman speed, its heat signature larger than any normal German shepherd should be. When it paused to investigate something off-screen, she caught a glimpse of the intelligence behind its movements. Calculated, strategic, almost human in its reasoning. A chill ran down her spine as she felt something brush against the edges of her consciousness. Just for a moment, like fingers trailing through water. She gripped the arms of her chair, forcing her mental barriers higher. "Dr. Chen, what's the latest on the enhancement protocol?" Hayes continued. A slight woman in wire-rimmed glasses stood near the front. Project Cerberus was designed to create the ultimate military working dog. Enhanced strength, speed, sensory perception, and most critically, elevated cognitive function. "We succeeded beyond our projections, too well," muttered someone from the CDC contingent. Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. The subject showed remarkable adaptation to the neural enhancements, IQ equivalent to a human adolescent, with the predatory instincts and physical capabilities of an apex predator. The handler, Sergeant Morrison, maintained perfect control for 8 months, until Morrison died in that training accident, Hayes said grimly. Then our wonder dog decided to go AWOL. Sarah knew there was more to it than that. She'd read Morrison's file, a decorated handler with an intuitive connection to working dogs that bordered on supernatural. Some handlers just had the gift. What the scientists didn't understand was that their genetic tampering had created something that required more than traditional training methods to control. "Current location estimates?" asked Colonel Reeves, the operations military liaison. "Satellite tracking suggests he's moving toward the Cascade Wilderness area," Dr. Chen replied. Population density is low, but there are several hiking trails and camping areas. Memorial Day weekend is approaching. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Hundreds of families would be heading into those mountains, completely unaware of what was hunting in the shadows. Tranquilizer protocols have failed, Hayes continued. Conventional doses that would drop a grizzly bear barely slow him down. The enhancement process included accelerated metabolism and toxin resistance. Sarah felt another probe against her mental defenses, stronger this time. Her breath caught as fragmented images flashed through her mind. Morrison's face, the scent of pine needles, the taste of fear. She pressed her fingertips against her temples, struggling to maintain control. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice belonged to Agent Martinez, seated beside her. Sarah realized the entire room was looking in her direction. She'd made some kind of sound, a gasp or whimper that had drawn attention. "Sorry, just a headache," she managed, forcing a weak smile. Hayes studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Perhaps we should discuss your assessment, Miss Connor. You've reviewed all the footage and files." Sarah stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far away from this room and this mission as possible. But Martinez's expectant expression and the weight of all those stares kept her rooted in place. "The dog, Cerberus, he's not just following instinct anymore," she said carefully. "The enhancement process gave him something approaching human-level intelligence, but without the social conditioning that keeps humans from acting on violent impulses. He's learning, adapting his tactics with each encounter." "Can he be recaptured?" Colonel Reeves asked. Sarah hesitated. Through her carefully maintained barriers, she could feel something vast and angry prowling at the edges of perception. Cerberus wasn't just physically enhanced. The genetic modifications had awakened something in his mind, expanded his consciousness beyond normal canine parameters. He was reaching out, searching for something or someone who could understand what he'd become. "Traditional methods won't work," she said finally. "He's too smart now, too aware of human tactics. Whoever approaches him needs to think like he thinks, connect with him on his level." "And who exactly would that be?" Hayes asked. Sarah met his gaze, knowing she was walking a tightrope between revelation and deception. Someone with an intuitive understanding of canine psychology. Someone who can get inside his head. The psychic pressure against her barriers intensified suddenly, accompanied by a flash of recognition that nearly buckled her knees. Somewhere in those mountains, Cerberus had felt her touch. He knew she was there, knew she was different from the others, and he was calling to her. The tactical van's engine hummed through the pre-dawn darkness as Sarah stared out the window, watching suburban houses blur past. Each home held sleeping families who had no idea a genetically modified killing machine was loose in their neighborhood. Her fingers drummed against her thigh, a nervous habit she'd picked up after leaving the Corps. "Target was last spotted 6 blocks from here," Agent Morrison said from the driver's seat, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "Residential area, families with kids." Sarah's jaw tightened. The weight of the tranquilizer rifle across her lap felt inadequate. She'd seen what enhanced military dogs could do when they went rogue during her deployment. Standard protocols wouldn't work here. "What's the dog's designation?" she asked. "Cerberus 7, German Shepherd mix, 130 pounds, enhanced muscle density, heightened aggression triggers and—" Morrison paused, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Apparently some kind of neural modifications that we're still trying to understand." Neural modifications. Sarah's stomach dropped. That could mean anything from enhanced intelligence to altered brain chemistry, or worse, it could mean the dog had been given abilities similar to her own. The thought made her temples throb with familiar pressure. The van slowed as they entered the target zone. Morrison killed the headlights and coasted to a stop behind a row of police vehicles, their red and blue lights painting the quiet street in harsh colors. Officers crouched behind open car doors, weapons drawn but useless. Standard ammunition would barely slow down an enhanced K9, and these cops knew it. Sarah stepped out of the van, immediately hit by a wave of sensory information that had nothing to do with her normal five senses. Fear radiated from every direction, sharp, metallic, overwhelming. The emotions of dozens of people pressed against her mental barriers like a rising tide. She gritted her teeth and forced the walls in her mind higher, stronger. "Ma'am, I need you to stay back," a young officer approached, his hand resting on his weapon. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "She's with us." Morrison flashed his badge. "Where's the animal now?" "Backyard of 1247 Oak Street. Families barricaded inside, but the sliding door is just glass. Won't hold long if it decides to go through." The officer's voice cracked slightly. "Thing already took down 2 of our K9s. Never seen anything like it." Sarah closed her eyes and let her mental barriers drop just enough to probe outward, searching. Past the cluster of human emotions, past the familiar presence of the police dogs, she found something else. Something that made her blood run cold. Raw fury, but underneath it, pain, confusion. The chaotic thoughts of an animal that had been pushed beyond its natural limits. And threading through it all, an intelligence that felt wrong, artificial. They hadn't just enhanced the dog's body, they'd tampered with its mind. "I need to get closer," she said, already moving toward the house. "Negative," Morrison grabbed her arm. "We stick to the plan. Long-range tranquilizer, then extraction." Sarah shook him off. "Your plan won't work. That dog isn't just enhanced, it's been mentally conditioned. It's not going to react like a normal animal." She met his eyes. "Trust me on this." Before he could protest, a sound split the air that made everyone freeze. Not quite a howl, not quite a roar, but something in between that spoke of pain and rage in equal measure. Car alarms started going off in response to the inhuman noise. Sarah ran. She vaulted over a chain-link fence and sprinted across a darkened yard, her enhanced hearing picking up Morrison cursing behind her. The telepathic pressure in her head grew stronger as she got closer to the target house. Whatever had been done to Cerberus -7, it was broadcasting its mental anguish like a psychic beacon. She rounded the corner of 1247 Oak Street and saw it. The dog stood in the center of the backyard, massive head lowered, hackles raised. Even in the dim light from the house's back porch, she could see this wasn't a normal German shepherd. Its shoulders were too broad, its jaw too heavy, its eyes reflecting an unnatural silver gleam. Scars crisscrossed its coat where surgical procedures had been performed. It turned toward her, and Sarah felt the full force of its altered mind slam into hers. Pain, confusion, and underneath it all, a desperate need for the agony to stop. Someone had tried to give this animal human-level intelligence while leaving all its predatory instincts intact. The result was a creature caught between two natures, driven to madness by the conflict. The dog's lips pulled back to reveal teeth that had been surgically enhanced with metal caps. A low growl rumbled from its chest as it took a step toward her. Sarah raised her hands slowly, deliberately making herself vulnerable. Then she did the one thing she'd sworn never to do again. She opened her mind completely and reached out to touch the tortured consciousness of Cerberus 7. The contact hit her like a physical blow, and she gasped as alien thoughts flooded her awareness. The military transport vibrated beneath Sarah's boots as she studied the classified files spread across the metal table. Each page revealed another horrifying detail about Project Cerberus, the program that had created the beast, now terrorizing the outskirts of Portland. The dog, if it could still be called that, had been engineered with enhanced muscle density, accelerated healing, and neural modifications that were supposed to increase tactical intelligence. Instead, they'd created a killing machine. Subject designation: KC-047, call sign Reaper, Dr. Martinez read aloud from across the cramped cargo hold. German Shepherd-based genetics, enhanced with synthetic growth hormones and experimental neural stimulants. Weight, 140 pounds. Bite force, 800 psi. Enhanced night vision, improved scent detection, and She paused, her face pale in the dim lighting. Aggressive behavioral modifications that appear to have exceeded parameters. Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd worked with military dogs for 6 years, and every instinct screamed that this was wrong. Dogs weren't weapons to be manufactured. They were partners, companions, beings capable of loyalty and love. The thought of what they'd done to this animal made her stomach turn. Colonel Hayes leaned forward, his weathered face grim. 3 hours ago, KC-047 escaped from the Cascade Research Facility. Initial reports suggested equipment failure, but security footage tells a different story. The animal deliberately bypassed multiple containment protocols. It's learned to adapt. The footage played on a small monitor, grainy and stuttering. Sarah watched as a massive shadow moved through the facility's corridors with predatory precision. The creature, she couldn't bring herself to think of it as a dog, methodically disabled security cameras and door locks. When guards approached, it struck with surgical efficiency, leaving them alive but incapacitated. "Current location?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer from the growing knot of anxiety in her chest. "Residential area, Forest Grove subdivision. We've evacuated a 6-block radius, but—" Hayes gestured helplessly. "This thing is smart, Adams. Every time we establish a perimeter, it finds a way through. It's like it can sense our movements before we make them." Sarah's blood ran cold. The familiar weight of suppressed memories pressed against her mind. Late nights in Afghanistan, when she'd known exactly where the IEDs were hidden, when she could feel the fear radiating from enemy combatants before they appeared. The abilities she'd spent years burying threatened to surface as her connection to military dogs had always made them stronger. "What's the mission objective?" she forced herself to ask. Dr. Martinez and Colonel Hayes exchanged glances. "Neutralization," Hayes said finally. "We've tried tranquilizers, but its enhanced metabolism burns through them too quickly. Standard containment equipment can't hold it. You're our last option before we resort to—" He didn't finish, but Sarah understood. They wanted to kill it. "I need to see the neural modification specs," she said quietly. Martinez hesitated. "That's classified above your clearance level." "Then declassify it." Sarah's voice carried an edge that made both officers straighten. "If you want my help, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. What did you do to its brain?" After a long moment, Martinez pulled out another file. Experimental neural implants designed to enhance tactical processing. But the technology was borrowed from a classified government research project, something called the Prometheus Initiative. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Prometheus, the project that had identified and studied individuals with psychic abilities. The same project whose researchers had approached her after Afghanistan, asking questions about her uncanny success rate with military dogs. She'd run before they could dig deeper, but apparently their work had continued. "They gave it telepathic capabilities," she whispered. "Enhanced neural processing," Martinez corrected, but Sarah could see the truth in her eyes. Everything clicked into place. The creature's ability to anticipate their movements, its methodical intelligence, the way it had escaped. It wasn't just enhanced physically. They'd tried to replicate psychic abilities in an animal that already possessed heightened senses and pack instincts. The result was a predator that could read human thoughts and intentions. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing to the small window. Below, the lights of Portland spread out like fallen stars. Somewhere in that urban maze, a tortured animal was acting on programming it couldn't control, driven by modifications it didn't understand. "There's something else," Hayes said reluctantly. "The creature has been selective in its attacks. It's avoiding families with children, steering clear of schools and hospitals. It's almost like it's trying to minimize civilian casualties while following some kind of directive." Sarah pressed her forehead against the cold glass. The beast wasn't just a mindless killer. It was fighting its programming, trying to retain some shred of the loyalty and protectiveness that defined its species. But that internal war wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the modifications would win, and then nothing would be safe. She turned back to face the others. How long until we reach the operational zone? 20 minutes, Hayes replied. Sarah nodded, her decision made. I'll need complete operational control. No interference, no backup plans involving lethal force. If you want this to work, you have to trust me, even if it meant exposing the very abilities that could destroy her life. The military convoy stretched along Highway 12 like a steel serpent, dust clouds trailing behind armored vehicles as they carved through the Nevada desert. Sarah pressed herself against the passenger window of the lead Humvee, watching the barren landscape blur past while her mind churned with fragments of intercepted thoughts from the soldiers around her. Hope this isn't another wild goose chase. Garcia's wife is having the baby next week. Poor bastard might miss it. That handler chick gives me the creeps. Something off about her. Sarah winced and reinforced her mental barriers. 3 days of constant proximity to dozens of minds was wearing her defenses thin. She hadn't slept properly since leaving the base, afraid of what might slip through if she let her guard down completely. ETA. 15 minutes to the coordinates, announced Lieutenant Morrison from the driver's seat. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel, and Sarah caught the edge of his anxiety before he could mask it. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they were all terrified of what they might find. Colonel Hayes crackled through the radio from the command vehicle. All units, maintain tactical spacing. Remember, our priority is containment. The asset is extremely dangerous, but we need it recovered intact if possible. Sarah's jaw tightened. Asset, as if Rex were just another piece of equipment instead of a living being whose mind had been twisted by military experimentation. She'd read his full file during the flight to Nevada. The genetic modifications, the neural implants, the behavioral conditioning that had gone catastrophically wrong during a training exercise 3 weeks ago. The radio buzzed again. Handler Ross, you're still confident you can establish communication? Sarah keyed the handset, forcing her voice steady. Yes, sir. Dogs respond to familiar pack dynamics. If I can get close enough to demonstrate non-threatening behavior, I should be able to calm him down enough for the tranquilizer teams to work. It wasn't entirely a lie. Traditional dog handling techniques might work if Rex retained enough of his original conditioning. But Sarah knew her real advantage lay in abilities she could never reveal. The question was whether she could use them without exposing herself. The convoy crested a ridge and spread out across a plateau dotted with Joshua trees and scrub brush. In the distance, Sarah could see the remains of the research facility, twisted metal and concrete scattered across a half-mile radius like the aftermath of a tornado. The destruction was worse than the satellite photos had suggested. Jesus Christ, Morrison muttered. What kind of animal could do that? Sarah was already reaching out with her mind, probing the area for any trace of Rex's consciousness. At first, she found nothing but the usual desert wildlife. Lizards, jackrabbits, a coyote pack denning somewhere in the rocks. Then, at the very edge of her range, she felt something that made her blood turn cold. Rage, pure incandescent fury mixed with pain and confusion. It wasn't entirely animal. There were fragments of human-like thought patterns woven through the chaos, probably from the neural implants. But underneath it all was something that had once been a German shepherd named Rex, terrified and alone and slowly losing himself to the modifications that were rewriting his brain. The convoy ground to a halt near the facility's perimeter. Sarah climbed out of the Humvee and immediately wished she hadn't extended her mental reach so far. The desert sun felt like a hammer against her skull, and the proximity to Rex's tortured psyche sent needles of sympathetic pain through her temples. "You all right, Ross?" Dr. Reeves had appeared beside her, medical kit in hand and concern creasing her features. "You look pale." "Just the heat," Sarah lied, accepting the water bottle Reeves offered. She drained half of it in one pull, using the moment to shore up her mental defenses. "I'll need to approach the target area alone initially. Large groups will trigger his pack threat response." Colonel Hayes strode over, his expression grim. "Negative. You're not going in there without backup." Sir, with respect, Rex was trained to identify and neutralize human threats. The more soldiers you send with me, the more likely he is to attack. Sarah gestured toward the destroyed facility. You've seen what he's capable of when he feels cornered. Hayes followed her gaze to a concrete wall that had been torn apart as if by heavy machinery, except the gouges were clearly from massive claws, and the bite marks in the twisted rebar could only have come from jaws far larger than any normal dog possessed. 30 minutes, Hayes said finally. You get 30 minutes to establish contact. After that, we go to lethal force. Sarah nodded, already planning her approach. She would need to drop most of her mental barriers to truly connect with Rex, which meant 30 minutes of complete vulnerability. If any of the soldiers suspected what she was really doing, her secret would be blown and her career destroyed. But looking at the devastation around them, she knew she didn't have a choice. Rex was suffering, and she was the only one who could reach him. The abandoned subway tunnel stretched ahead like a concrete throat, swallowing the beam of Sarah's flashlight. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, each drop echoing off the curved walls with metronomic precision. She moved carefully along the rusted tracks, her boots finding purchase on the uneven gravel between the rails. Behind her, Colonel Hayes and his tactical team maintained a 20-yard distance, just as she'd demanded. Their infrared scopes and motion detectors had lost track of Kodiak an hour ago, but Sarah could feel him down here, a volatile storm of pain and confusion pressing against the edges of her consciousness. The telepathic connection had been growing stronger since their encounter at the warehouse. What started as fleeting impressions now felt like a constant low-frequency hum in her mind. She could sense his location, roughly 300 yards ahead, but more disturbing were the fragments of thought that occasionally broke through, flashes of sterile laboratories, the sting of needles, and beneath it all, a desperate longing for something he couldn't name. Sarah paused at a junction where 3 tunnels converged. Her breath misted in the underground chill as she closed her eyes and extended her awareness. The psychic landscape down here was cleaner than above ground, fewer human minds cluttering the signal. She could map Kodiak's presence with uncomfortable clarity. He wasn't moving randomly. There was purpose in his path, a destination he was seeking through the labyrinth of abandoned transit lines. But what could a genetically modified dog want in these forgotten depths? A memory surfaced unbidden, not her own, but something bleeding through their connection. A man in military fatigues, young and smiling, throwing a tennis ball in what looked like a training facility. The emotional resonance hit her like a physical blow. Love, loyalty, the simple joy of pleasing someone who mattered. His handler, she whispered, understanding flooding through her. Kodiak wasn't just running, he was searching. Her radio crackled. Martinez, we're picking up movement on the perimeter sensors. Whatever's down there with you, it's big. I know. Sarah opened her eyes and chose the leftmost tunnel, following the pull in her mind. Maintain your distance. He's not hunting anymore. He's looking for someone. The tunnel sloped downward, leading toward what her mental map suggested was the old freight terminal beneath the financial district. As she walked, more memories leaked through their bond. A cramped kennel, scientists discussing neurological modifications in clinical voices, the gradual realization that the voices in his head weren't normal, weren't something other dogs experienced. Sarah stumbled as the full weight of his telepathic awakening hit her consciousness. They'd given him her gift, or something like it, but without context, without training. No wonder he'd become unstable. The constant bombardment of human thoughts, the inability to distinguish between his own emotions and those of others around him, it would drive anyone mad. She'd spent decades learning to build mental walls, to filter the noise. He'd been thrown into the deep end and left to drown. The tunnel opened into a wider maintenance area. Ancient electrical boxes lined the walls, their metal faces streaked with rust. And there, in the circle of her flashlight beam, sat Kodiak. He was massive up close, easily twice the size of a normal German shepherd, his dark fur marred by healing cuts from his escape, but it was his eyes that stopped her cold. They held an intelligence that was utterly human, completely aware, and deeply, fundamentally broken. Sarah slowly lowered her flashlight and took a careful step forward. "Hey, boy." Kodiak's head tilted, and she felt his attention focus on her like a laser. In her mind, his voice came through with startling clarity. Not words, but concepts wrapped in canine perception. Pack leader scent gone. Search, search, search. Where is warm voice safe hands? The images that accompanied his thoughts showed a young Marine corporal, probably barely out of his teens. She recognized the face from the files Hayes had shown her, Corporal Danny Reeves, killed in action 3 months ago during the mission that was supposed to be Kodiak's first field deployment. Oh, sweetheart. Sarah's throat tightened. He's not here. Danny's gone. The wave of grief that crashed through their connection nearly brought her to her knees. It wasn't just loss, it was confusion, the inability to understand why his pack leader's scent had simply vanished from the world. In his enhanced but still fundamentally canine mind, it was a puzzle that demanded solving, a wound that couldn't heal. Kodiak stood slowly, his massive frame trembling. She could feel his internal struggle, the competing impulses of his modified genetics, the psychic noise that never stopped, and underneath it all, the simple desire to find his way home to someone who would never call his name again. Sarah held out her hand, palm up, letting him catch her scent. Their mental connection deepened, and for a moment, she shared the full weight of his engineered existence, the loneliness, the confusion, and the terrible clarity that came with knowing too much. "I understand," she whispered. "I know what it's like to have voices in your head." The abandoned warehouse stretched before them like a concrete moor, its broken windows reflecting the pale afternoon light. Maya crouched behind the rusted hull of an overturned truck, her enhanced hearing picking up the subtle sounds that had guided them here, the rhythmic panting of something massive, the scrape of claws against concrete, the low rumble of a predator at rest. "There," she whispered to Colonel Reeves, pointing toward a gaping hole in the warehouse's eastern wall. "He's inside." Through her telepathic connection, she could feel Titan's presence like a dark storm cloud pressing against her consciousness. The K9's mind was a chaotic landscape of fragmented memories and programmed responses, but underneath it all, she sensed something that made her chest tighten: exhaustion. The genetically enhanced shepherd was tired, confused, and despite his lethal capabilities, afraid. Reeves adjusted his tactical vest and checked his weapon one final time. "My team is in position around the perimeter. Remember, if this goes sideways—" "It won't," Maya interrupted, though uncertainty gnawed at her. She'd never attempted to establish a full telepathic link with an animal this heavily modified. Titan's neural pathways had been altered, enhanced, twisted into something that barely resembled a natural canine mind. The risk of getting trapped in his fractured psyche was real. She closed her eyes and extended her consciousness toward the warehouse, feeling for the edges of Titan's mental barriers. The moment her mind touched his, pain lanced through her skull like white-hot needles. Images flooded her awareness. Laboratory tables, surgical lights, the faces of scientists in masks, the sting of countless injections. Titan's memories of his transformation were a kaleidoscope of agony and confusion. "Easy," she projected, trying to wrap her mental voice in the calm authority she'd once used with her own K9 partner. "I'm not here to hurt you." The response was immediate and violent. Titan's consciousness slammed against hers like a battering ram, and she gasped, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. Through the link, she felt him surge to his feet inside the warehouse, his enhanced senses detecting her presence even from this distance. "He knows we're here," she managed to tell Reeves. "I'm going in." "Maya, wait." But she was already moving, leaving cover and walking toward the warehouse with deliberate, measured steps. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to project calm confidence through the telepathic link. Behind the chaos in Titan's mind, she sensed something else: loneliness. The experiments had isolated him, turned him into a weapon while stripping away his pack bonds, his purpose, everything that made him more than just a collection of enhanced reflexes and programmed responses. "I know what they did to you," she projected, as she approached the hole in the wall. "I know how much it hurts." This time his mental recoil was less violent, tinged with something that might have been curiosity. Maya stepped through the opening into the warehouse's shadowy interior, her eyes adjusting quickly to the dim light. Titan stood at the far end of the cavernous space, his massive form silhouetted against a shaft of sunlight from a broken skylight above. He was even larger than she'd expected, easily twice the size of a normal German shepherd. His black and tan coat rippled over enhanced musculature, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural amber light, a side effect of the genetic modifications that had improved his night vision. When he turned his head toward her, she could see the intelligence there, sharp and wild and desperate. "They made you into something you never chose to be," she continued, taking another careful step forward. "But you're still a dog underneath it all. You still remember what it felt like to have a handler who cared about you." Titan's lips pulled back from teeth that had been surgically sharpened, but Maya sensed confusion rather than aggression. Through their link, she caught fragments of older memories, a younger version of Titan playing with a rope toy, receiving praise from a trainer who'd actually seemed to care, the simple joy of a job well done before the experiments began. "That's it," she whispered, both aloud and telepathically. "Remember who you used to be." She was close enough now to see the scars hidden beneath his coat, the surgical marks where they'd implanted neural enhancement devices. Her heart clenched with sympathy, but she kept her mental voice steady. "I can't undo what they did to you," she admitted, "but I can help you find some peace. You don't have to be their weapon anymore." Titan took a step toward her, then stopped, his massive head tilting in a gesture that was purely canine despite his monstrous size. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for their breathing, his harsh and rapid, hers carefully controlled. Then, without warning, alarms began blaring outside. Through the telepathic link, Maya felt Titan's fragile calm shatter like glass, his enhanced fight-or-flight responses overriding everything else. His eyes blazed brighter, and a growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building rumbled from his throat. Something had gone wrong. The military compound buzzed with controlled chaos as Maya stepped through the security checkpoint for the second time in 12 hours. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Dr. Chen walked beside her, clutching a tablet loaded with behavioral modification protocols, while Colonel Morrison strode ahead with the confidence of a man who believed he still controlled the situation. Maya's head throbbed from the constant mental static emanating from the containment facility. Even at this distance, she could feel Apex's consciousness pressing against her shields like a tide against a seawall. The connection they'd forged yesterday had left permanent channels between their minds, pathways that refused to close despite her best efforts. "The tranquilizer wore off 3 hours ago," Morrison was saying as they approached the main building. "Since then, he's been different. Calmer but more alert. The techs think he's planning something." Maya almost laughed at the absurdity. Of course Apex was planning something. His enhanced intelligence made him capable of strategic thinking that surpassed most humans, and his time in captivity had only sharpened that edge. What Morrison didn't understand was that Apex wasn't just planning an escape, he was planning a reckoning. Through their mental link, she caught fragments of the dog's thoughts, flashes of rage at his handlers, memories of painful experiments, and underneath it all, a growing recognition of what he truly was. The genetic modifications had awakened something primal yet sophisticated, a hybrid consciousness that belonged neither to the animal kingdom nor the human world. Dr. Chen stopped walking abruptly, studying her tablet with a frown. "The biometric readings are anomalous. His brain activity shows patterns we've never seen before, almost like he's communicating with someone." Maya's stomach dropped. She forced her expression to remain neutral while frantically reinforcing her mental barriers. "What kind of patterns?" "Rhythmic neural firing in the telepathic centers. It shouldn't be possible. Dogs don't have the brain structure for complex telepathic communication, even enhanced ones. Chen looked up from the screen, her eyes sharp with scientific curiosity. Unless he's somehow interfacing with another telepathic entity. Morrison's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. Are you suggesting there's another enhanced animal we don't know about? Not another animal, Chen said slowly. A human telepath. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Maya felt the familiar spike of panic that had dominated her childhood, the same terror she'd experienced when other children started avoiding her, when teachers looked at her with suspicion, when her own parents began to fear what their daughter might become. She was spared from responding by a thunderous crash from the direction of the containment facility. Alarms began blaring, and red warning lights bathed the compound in an ominous glow. Through the cacophony, Maya heard something that chilled her blood, the deep, resonant howl of an apex predator announcing its freedom. Security personnel rushed past them toward the source of the disturbance, their weapons drawn and faces grim. Morrison grabbed his radio, shouting orders that were barely audible over the sirens. In the chaos, Maya closed her eyes and let her consciousness extend toward the facility. What she found there made her gasp. Apex hadn't just escaped his containment cell, he'd systematically dismantled it. The reinforced walls were torn apart with surgical precision, each piece of debris placed to create maximum psychological impact. He'd left a message written in scratched metal and scattered concrete, a pattern that spoke directly to Maya's telepathic perception. "Find me," the pattern said, alone. The mental contact was stronger now, no longer filtered through barriers of steel and concrete. Apex's consciousness brushed against hers with surprising gentleness, a stark contrast to the destruction he'd left behind. In that touch she felt his loneliness, his confusion, and his desperate need to understand what he'd become, but she also felt his hunger. The genetic modifications hadn't just enhanced his intelligence and physical capabilities, they'd amplified every aspect of his predatory nature. His need to hunt, to dominate, to assert control over his territory had grown beyond anything his handlers could have anticipated. The compound wasn't his prison anymore, it was his hunting ground. Morrison's voice cut through her telepathic connection. "Williams, we need you to track him. You said you could read his behavioral patterns. Prove it." Maya opened her eyes to find both Morrison and Dr. Chen staring at her expectantly. Around them, the compound had transformed into a war zone as security teams established perimeters and civilian personnel were evacuated to safe zones. She could hear the distant sound of helicopters approaching, reinforcements that would turn this into a bloodbath if they arrived before she could reach Apex. "He's heading for the eastern perimeter," she said, the lie coming easily. Through their link, she knew Apex was actually moving toward the residential sector where off-duty personnel lived with their families. "He's trying to reach the forest." As Morrison coordinated the search in the wrong direction, Maya slipped away from the group. She had perhaps 20 minutes before they realized their mistake. 20 minutes to find Apex before he encountered innocent civilians who couldn't defend themselves against a telepathic killing machine. 20 minutes to save them all from the monster she'd helped create. The sedative hit Coda like a sledgehammer, but his enhanced metabolism burned through it faster than Dr. Chen had calculated. Maya felt his consciousness flicker and surge back to life through their mental link, accompanied by a wave of rage that nearly knocked her off her feet. "He's fighting it," she gasped, gripping the observation deck railing. Below them, Coda's massive form twitched on the containment room floor, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat. Colonel Harrison's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less." Maya pressed her palm against the reinforced glass, extending her awareness into the room below. Coda's mind was a storm of confusion and fury, the genetic modifications creating feedback loops that amplified every emotion. The anger is getting stronger. Something in his brain chemistry is responding to the drugs in the wrong way. Dr. Chen frantically adjusted readings on his tablet. The neural inhibitors should have suppressed his enhanced aggression centers. This shouldn't be possible. Tell that to him, Harrison muttered, as Coda's eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural amber light. Maya felt the moment Coda's consciousness fully returned. His mental voice crashed into hers like a tsunami, no longer the confused animal she'd connected with before. This was something else entirely, a predator awakening to its full potential. They cage me, they poison me, they will pay. The thought carried such violent intensity that Maya stumbled backward. Everyone needs to get away from this room. Now. Coda rose to his feet with fluid grace, his head turning to stare directly at the observation window. Even through the reinforced barrier, Maya could feel his attention like a physical weight. His lips pulled back in a snarl that revealed teeth designed for killing. "The containment field is holding," Chen said, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "For how long?" Harrison demanded. Before Chen could answer, Coda moved. Not the chaotic thrashing they'd witnessed before, but calculated and precise. He studied the walls, the ceiling, the electronic locks. His enhanced intelligence was fully engaged now, analyzing weaknesses with military efficiency. Maya closed her eyes and pushed deeper into the mental link, despite every instinct screaming at her to sever the connection. She had to understand what the modifications had done to him, had to find some trace of the loyal soldier he'd once been. What she found made her blood run cold. The genetic enhancements hadn't just increased his physical capabilities, they'd created entirely new neural pathways. Sections of his brain that should have remained dormant were blazing with activity. The military hadn't just created a super soldier, they'd created something that was rapidly evolving beyond their control. "You understand," Coda's mental voice was calmer now, almost conversational. "You see what they made me become?" Maya opened her eyes to find him standing motionless, staring at her with an intelligence that was no longer entirely canine. "He's not just enhanced," she whispered. "He's evolving. Right now, in real time." "Impossible," Chen protested, but his readings told a different story. Brain activity was spiking in regions that showed no previous enhancement. Through their link, Maya felt Coda reach out with senses she didn't fully understand. He was mapping the facility, counting heartbeats, analyzing threat patterns. Every human in the building had become a piece on a chessboard he was learning to play. Soldiers, 4 scientists, 1 colonel, and you, the one who speaks without words. "Get everyone out," Maya said urgently. "Evacuate the entire level." Harrison was already reaching for his radio when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. In that brief moment of darkness, Maya felt Coda's satisfaction ripple through their connection. He'd found the facility's weakness. Electrical systems, she realized. He's figured out how to manipulate them. The containment field flickered and died. Alarms blared as Coda padded to the reinforced door. He didn't try to break it down. Instead, he simply waited. The electronic lock cycled through its security protocols, red light shifting to green as if it had received the proper access codes. "How is he doing that?" Chen's voice cracked with panic. Maya felt the answer in the depths of Coda's transformed mind. The enhancements had given him limited electromagnetic sensitivity, allowing him to sense and influence electronic systems. Another modification that had grown beyond its intended scope. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Coda stepped into the corridor and paused, his massive head tilting as he listened to the sounds of evacuation above. When he looked up at the observation window again, his gaze found Maya with laser precision. "Come to me," his mental voice was a command wrapped in silk, face to face. "No barriers." "Like hell," Harrison growled, but Maya was already moving toward the door. "It's not a request," she said. "If I don't go down there willingly, he'll come up here. And then everyone dies." The facility shuddered as something exploded in the distance. Through their link, Maya felt Coda's amusement. He was just getting started. She reached for the door handle, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The beast was waiting, and her secrets were about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The warehouse felt different now, charged with an energy that made Maya's skin crawl. Apex stood 20 feet away, muscles coiled beneath his dark fur, yellow eyes fixed on her with an intensity that bordered on worship. The connection between them thrummed like a live wire, and Maya could feel his thoughts bleeding into hers. Fragmented memories of pain, rage, and something else. Something that felt almost like gratitude. "Easy, boy," she whispered, though she knew he was anything but a simple dog anymore. The genetic enhancements had twisted him into something between animal and weapon, and the telepathic link she'd forged was the only thing keeping him from tearing through the warehouse walls to hunt down his handlers. Dr. Reeves crouched behind an overturned table, her tablet still glowing with data streams from Apex's biomonitors. "His cortisol levels are dropping," she called out. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." But Maya could feel the truth beneath the surface calm. Apex's mind was a maelstrom of conflicting impulses, the loyalty bred into him warring against the rage of his captivity, enhanced intelligence struggling with animal instinct. She pressed deeper into the connection, trying to understand what Nexus Industries had done to him. Images flooded her consciousness, sterile laboratory rooms, needles piercing flesh, electricity coursing through neural pathways, scientists in white coats discussing acceptable loss parameters and behavioral modification protocols. They had tried to create the perfect weapon, but they had underestimated what enhanced intelligence meant for a creature that remembered every moment of torment. Maya staggered under the weight of his memories. Her own experiences in the military, the missions that had gone wrong, the friends she'd lost, it all paled compared to what Apex had endured. He had been conscious, aware, for every procedure that had transformed him from companion to killing machine. "They tortured you," she breathed, and Apex's ears flattened against his skull. His growl reverberated through the warehouse, but it wasn't directed at her anymore. It was pure hatred for those who had made him into this thing. The warehouse door exploded inward. Black-clad figures poured through, weapons raised, and Maya recognized the tactical gear of corporate security forces. Nexus had found them. "Stand down!" The lead operative's voice boomed through a speaker. "Return company property immediately." Company property. The words hit Apex like a physical blow, and Maya felt his rage spike through their connection. She threw herself sideways as he launched forward, a blur of fangs and fury that crashed into the first operative before the man could fire. Chaos erupted around them. Security forces spread out, trying to get clear shots while Apex moved like liquid death between them. Maya rolled behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off the warehouse floor. Through their link, she could feel Apex's tactical awareness. He was using his enhanced intelligence to predict their movements, staying ahead of their aim. "Maya!" Dr. Reeves scrambled toward her, clutching the tablet. "The upload is still running. If we can keep him calm for another few minutes." "Calm?" Maya watched Apex tear through body armor like paper. "He's not going to calm down while they're shooting at him." An operative flanked left, rifle trained on Apex's flank. Maya reached out through their connection, sharing her awareness of the threat. Apex spun and leaped, bringing the man down before he could fire. But there were too many of them, and Maya could feel exhaustion beginning to creep through Apex's enhanced metabolism. She closed her eyes and pushed deeper into the telepathic link than she'd ever gone before. The barriers between their minds dissolved, and suddenly she was seeing through his eyes, feeling the power in his limbs, the enhanced reflexes that made everything around him move in slow motion. But the connection worked both ways. Her memories flooded into his consciousness, not just the military training they shared, but everything else. Her childhood, her first tentative discoveries of her telepathic abilities, the years of hiding what she was, the fear of being turned into a weapon herself. Apex froze mid-leap, and Maya felt his shock reverberate through their bond. He understood now why she had found him, why she was the only one who could reach him. They were both refugees from those who would use their gifts for war. The operatives pressed their advantage, moving in for capture shots. Maya felt Apex's panic spike, but underneath it was something else, a desperate need to protect her, the first person who had shown him compassion instead of fear. She made her choice. Maya stood and walked into the open, hands raised. The operative's weapons swung toward her, but she spoke before they could fire. "I'm Dr. Maya Chen, formerly of Project Mindbridge." The lie came easily, borrowing from classified documents she'd glimpsed years ago. "I'm the only one who can control him. You want him back? We negotiate." Through their connection, she felt Apex's confusion, then understanding. He sank into a crouch beside her, still dangerous but no longer attacking. The lead operative lowered his weapon slightly, speaking into his comm unit. Maya had bought them time, but she knew it wouldn't last long. And when this was over, there would be no more hiding what she was. The military transport shuddered as it banked hard left, descending toward the extraction point. Maya pressed her palm against the cold metal wall, steadying herself as adrenaline coursed through her system. Through the small porthole, she could see smoke rising from the industrial district below, evidence of Omega's rampage. 2 minutes out, the pilot announced over the comm. Colonel Harrison sat across from her, his jaw set in grim determination. The past 12 hours had aged him visibly. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his usually pristine uniform bore coffee stains and wrinkles. "The containment teams are in position around the perimeter," he said, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "But they're maintaining distance. 3 more casualties in the last hour." Maya nodded, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled. The telepathic connection she'd forged with Omega had left her drained, vulnerable. Every time she'd reached out to the enhanced K9 over the past few hours, the contact had grown more chaotic, more painful. The military's genetic modifications had created something beyond their control, a mind caught between animal instinct and artificial intelligence, burning itself out from the inside. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, noting the tension in Harrison's shoulders. He exchanged glances with Dr. Reeves, who sat hunched over a tablet displaying bio-readings. The scientist looked up, his face pale. "Omega's neural activity is spiking beyond anything we've recorded. The enhancement protocols, they're cascading. His brain is essentially rewiring itself in real time. Meaning he's not just getting stronger or faster, he's becoming something else entirely. The telepathic dampeners we developed based on your initial contact, they're useless now. His mental signature has evolved past our countermeasures." The transport touched down with a jarring impact, and Maya felt her stomach drop for reasons that had nothing to do with the landing. Through her fractured connection with Omega, she sensed his location, 3 blocks east, moving through the abandoned warehouse district. His thoughts were a maelstrom of confusion, rage, and something that chilled her to the bone, a growing intelligence that recognized what it was becoming and fought against it. The cargo doors slid open, revealing a scene from a disaster movie. Emergency vehicles lined the streets, their red and blue lights painting the concrete in harsh, shifting colors. Soldiers in full tactical gear maintained a perimeter, but Maya could see the fear in their postures. They were dealing with something beyond their training. Lieutenant Torres jogged up to them, her radio crackling with constant updates. "Ma'am, civilian evacuation is 90% complete, but we've got stragglers in the residential area north of here." Omega's movement pattern suggests he's being drawn toward populated zones. Maya closed her eyes and extended her consciousness tentatively, like someone testing the temperature of scalding water. The contact hit her immediately, a lance of white-hot pain that made her stumble. Colonel Harrison caught her arm. "He's hunting," she gasped, pressing the heel of her hand against her temple. "Not randomly destroying. He's looking for something specific." "What?" The answer came to her with sickening clarity. "Other enhanced subjects. The military didn't just create one prototype, did they?" Dr. Reeves went rigid. "That's classified. Now's not the time for bureaucratic bullshit," Maya snapped. "How many others?" Harrison's face darkened. 3, all decommissioned 6 months ago when the program was suspended, decommissioned or relocated. The silence stretched too long. Maya felt Omega's presence growing stronger, more focused. He was close now, perhaps 2 blocks away. Through their connection, she glimpsed fractured images, concrete corridors, metal cages, the scent of fear and antiseptic. "He remembers," she whispered. "He remembers the others, and he thinks they're still alive, still suffering." An explosion echoed through the district, followed by the sharp crack of automatic weapons fire. Torres's radio erupted with panicked voices, reporting that the containment line had been breached. Maya stood slowly, her decision crystallizing with painful clarity. The partial connections she'd been making weren't enough to truly reach Omega. To break through the chaos consuming his enhanced mind, she would need to lower every mental barrier she'd spent years constructing. It meant exposing herself completely, not just to Omega, but potentially to every telepathic scanner within a 50-mile radius. "I need to get closer," she said. "Absolutely not," Harrison replied. You can't risk me being discovered as a telepath, or you can't risk losing your only advantage against a weapon you created and lost control of." Maya's voice carried an edge that made the colonel step back. Another explosion, closer this time. Through her fragmentary link with Omega, Maya felt his anguish, a creature caught between what he was and what he'd been forced to become, driven by loyalty to packmates who might already be dead. She started walking toward the sound of destruction, her mind already preparing for the most dangerous telepathic contact of her life. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the sound of Maya's ragged breathing as she pressed herself against the cold concrete wall. Through the grimy windows, she could see military vehicles surrounding the building, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights hunting for prey. Colonel Reeves had found them. Viper lay beside her, his massive frame tense but controlled. The connection between them hummed stronger than ever, a bridge of shared thoughts and emotions that had saved them both from the brink of destruction. But now that bridge might be their downfall. "They know," she whispered, her fingers finding the coarse fur behind Viper's ears. "Somehow they know what happened between us." The dog's golden eyes met hers, and she felt his understanding wash over her like a tide. Through their bond, she sensed his memory of the laboratory, the painful procedures, the men in white coats who had twisted his mind into a weapon. Dr. Kessler's experiments hadn't just enhanced Viper's physical capabilities, they had amplified his natural canine telepathy to dangerous levels, creating a psychic beacon that attracted others with similar abilities, including Maya. A loudspeaker crackled to life outside. "Dr. Chen, we know you're in there. Bring the asset out and no one gets hurt." Maya's blood ran cold. They weren't just after Viper anymore. They wanted her too. Her years of hiding, of suppressing her abilities, of living as just another former Marine trying to blend into civilian life, were over. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, feeling for the soldiers positioned around the building. 12 men, all armed, all focused on capture rather than kill. They needed both her and Viper alive. That gave her an advantage, but a slim one. Through the mental link, she felt Viper's protective instincts surge. Images flashed between them, his memories of her voice calling him back from the edge of madness, her hands gentle on his wounds, her mind touching his with compassion instead of commands. He would die before letting them take her. "No," she said firmly, both aloud and through their connection. "We do this smart, not desperate." She moved to the window and peered out at the military formation. Reeves stood beside an armored vehicle, his posture rigid with authority. Next to him was a figure she didn't recognize, a tall woman in a lab coat holding some kind of scanning device. The screen glowed with pulsing patterns that looked disturbingly familiar. "They're tracking our connection," Maya realized. The device was reading the psychic link between her and Viper like a radio signal. As long as they maintained their mental bond, they would never be able to hide. The thought of severing that connection sent panic through both of them. For Maya, it would mean losing the most profound relationship she'd ever experienced. For Viper, it would mean returning to the isolation and rage that had nearly consumed him, but staying linked would lead them both into captivity, into laboratories where they would become subjects rather than partners. Maya felt tears sting her eyes as she knelt beside Viper. "I need you to trust me one more time," she whispered. "I'm going to break our connection, but only temporarily. When I do, you need to run. Get as far from here as you can." Viper's mental voice resonated with refusal. The concept of abandoning her was incomprehensible to him. "Listen to me," she pressed, cupping his massive head in her hands. "They can only track us when we're linked. If we separate, you can escape. I'll find another way out." She felt his anguish, his loyalty warring with the logic of her plan. Through their bond, she shared her own memories, her years of evading detection, her skills at staying hidden. She could survive without the connection, even if it would feel like losing a piece of her soul. Outside, the soldiers were moving closer. Maya could hear their footsteps on gravel, their muted communications as they prepared to breach the building. Time was running out. With effort that felt like tearing away part of herself, Maya began to withdraw from Viper's mind. The connection that had felt as natural as breathing became strained, stretched thin like a rubber band about to snap. Viper whimpered, pressing closer to her, trying to maintain the link through physical contact. "Go," she urged, even as the separation sent waves of pain through her skull. "Run, and stay free." The mental bridge between them finally severed with an almost audible snap. Viper stumbled, his eyes wide with sudden loneliness. Maya gasped at the emptiness where his presence had been, the silence in her mind deafening after the constant hum of shared consciousness. For a moment, they stared at each other across a gulf that felt wider than oceans. Then Viper turned and bounded toward the warehouse's rear exit, his enhanced muscles carrying him into the shadows beyond the building. Maya stood alone in the darkness, listening to the soldiers closing in, knowing she had just lost the most important connection of her life to save them both. The underground laboratory hummed with an energy that made Sarah's teeth ache. Emergency lighting cast everything in stark red shadows, and the metallic tang of spilled chemicals mixed with something else, something organic and wrong. She pressed herself against the corridor wall, listening to the rhythmic panting echoing from deeper within the facility. "He's close," she whispered into her comm unit. "Maybe 50 meters ahead." Marcus's voice crackled back through the static. "Sarah, the building's structural integrity is compromised. We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole section collapses." She touched the wall and felt the vibrations running through the concrete, microfractures spreading like spider webs through the foundation. The enhanced K9, designation Cerberus, had torn through 3 levels of reinforced barriers to reach this sub-basement. Whatever Dr. Reeves had done to him in those final experiments, it had pushed his already superhuman strength beyond all parameters. Sarah closed her eyes and extended her consciousness carefully, like dipping a toe into scalding water. The psychic landscape around Cerberus was a maelstrom of rage and confusion, but underneath it she sensed something else. Pain. Deep, constant pain that had been building for weeks. She moved forward, her boots silent on the debris-strewn floor. Around the corner she could see the massive shape hunched over what remained of a laboratory workstation. Cerberus was easily twice the size of a normal German shepherd, his black coat shot through with veins of luminescent blue where the genetic modifications had taken hold. His head turned as she approached, and his eyes, once brown and warm like any dog's, now glowed with an unnatural amber light. "Easy, boy," she projected gently, keeping her mental voice calm and non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dog's massive head tilted, confusion rippling through his psychic presence. He'd been engineered for enhanced intelligence, but the experimental drugs had fractured his mind into competing impulses, loyalty, warring with aggression, pack instincts twisted into paranoid violence. "I know you remember," Sarah continued, taking another step closer. "You remember your first handler, Lieutenant Brooks. You remember the feel of his hand on your head, the way he smelled like coffee and gun oil." Cerberus whimpered, a sound so heartbreaking it nearly broke Sarah's concentration. Through their connection, she felt the weight of his memories, Missions in hostile territory, the absolute trust between soldier and canine, the simple joy of a job well done. But those memories were corrupted now, poisoned by whatever Reeves had pumped into his system. Sarah Marcus's voice was more urgent now. Seismic sensors are showing massive stress fractures. You need to get out of there. She ignored him, focusing entirely on the tortured mind before her. They hurt you, she acknowledged, letting her own anger seep into the projection. They took away your choice, your peace, but this isn't who you are. Cerberus snarled, his lips pulling back to reveal teeth that had been surgically enhanced with titanium caps. The rational part of his mind was losing the battle against the chemically induced rage. Sarah felt his muscles tensing, preparing to spring. She had to go deeper. Sarah dropped to her knees and fully opened her telepathic abilities, abandoning all the careful barriers she'd built over the years. The sensation was like diving into an ocean of broken glass. Cerberus's pain and fury crashed over her in waves that left her gasping. But she pushed through, searching for the core of who he'd been before the experiments began. There, she found it. A small, protected space in his mind where his true self still existed. A dog who wanted nothing more than to serve, to protect, to be part of a pack that valued him. She wrapped her consciousness around that core, shielding it from the chaos surrounding it. "I see you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I see who you really are." The change was immediate. Cerberus's aggressive posture melted away, replaced by confusion and something like hope. He took a tentative step toward her, then another. Sarah held perfectly still as the massive dog approached, his enhanced senses cataloguing her scent and body language. When his enormous head finally came to rest against her shoulder, she felt his relief wash over her like a tide. The rage was still there, still fighting to break free, but her presence gave him something to anchor to, a reminder of what it felt like to trust and be trusted in return. "Good boy," she whispered aloud, her hand finding the spot behind his ears that all dogs loved. "You're going to be okay now." The building shuddered around them, dust raining from the ceiling. Through her connection with Cerberus, she could feel his enhanced senses detecting the imminent collapse better than any human instrument. They had maybe 2 minutes. "Can you run?" she asked him. "Can you trust me enough to run?" His answer came not in words, but in a surge of determination that nearly knocked her backward. Whatever else the experiments had taken from him, they'd left him his courage. Together, they turned toward the exit, moving as one mind in 2 bodies. The facility's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Maya pressed her back against the corridor wall, her mind still reeling from the psychic backlash. Somewhere, in the darkness ahead, she could hear the creature moving, metal groaning under massive paws, the whisper of claws against concrete. The connection she'd forged with it had shattered like glass, leaving jagged fragments of its consciousness embedded in her own. "Maya!" Collins' voice crackled through her earpiece. "The containment protocols are failing. Whatever you did, it's only made things worse." She closed her eyes, fighting the nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. The beast's memories were bleeding into hers, flashes of needles and surgical lights, of trainers who spoke in cold, clinical tones. But underneath the programmed aggression, she'd felt something else, something that made her chest tighten with recognition. Fear. Pure animal terror. "It's not uncontrollable," she whispered into her comm. "It's terrified." "What?" "The enhancement process. It didn't just amplify its physical capabilities, it amplified everything. Every sensation, every emotion, every instinct." Maya pushed herself away from the wall, her legs still shaky. Imagine being trapped in a body that's too strong, too fast, with senses so acute that every sound is like a gunshot, every smell burns like acid. A crash echoed from the laboratory section, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Emergency klaxons wailed through the facility, and Maya could hear boots pounding against metal grating as security teams mobilized. "Maya, get out of there," Collins ordered. "We're sealing the sector." "No." She started moving toward the sounds of destruction, her hand trailing along the wall for guidance. If you trap it, it'll only get worse. The panic will drive it completely over the edge. Then what do you suggest? Because in 15 minutes, this thing is going to break through into the civilian research wing. Maya's mind raced. The partial connection had shown her fragments of the creature's psyche, a maelstrom of confusion and pain, overlaid with combat programming that turned every stimulus into a potential threat. But beneath all of that, buried under layers of genetic manipulation and psychological conditioning, something else remained. The ghost of what it had been before. "I need to go deeper," she said, turning the corner into the main laboratory. Emergency lighting revealed the devastation. Overturned equipment, chemical spills eating through the floor, claw marks gouged deep into reinforced walls. "I have to find the original personality matrix." "Are you insane? You barely survived the first attempt." Maya paused at the threshold, remembering her father's warnings about the dangers of deep telepathic contact, how minds could become entangled, how identities could blur and merge until you lost track of where you ended and the other consciousness began. She'd seen it happen to other enhanced individuals, telepaths who'd pushed too far and never found their way back. But she also remembered something else. The moment during her first connection when the beast had pulled back, recognizing her as something other than a threat. For just an instant, it had shown restraint. A metallic scraping drew her attention to the far end of the lab. The creature emerged from behind an overturned centrifuge, its massive form moving with predatory grace. In the red emergency lighting, its enhanced musculature was clearly visible beneath the dark fur. Shoulders that could have belonged to a grizzly bear, legs built for speeds that would outpace a racing car. Its eyes, when they fixed on her, glowed with an unnatural silver light. Maya stepped into the room, her hands raised but not in surrender. Slowly she knelt on the debris-covered floor, making herself smaller, less threatening. The beast's ears swiveled forward, tracking her movement. "I know you're still in there," she said softly, not trusting the comm to transmit her words. "I know they tried to bury you under all that programming, but you're still there." The creature took a step forward, then another. Its breathing was labored, and Maya could see stress fractures in its enhanced bone structure. The modifications were literally tearing it apart from the inside. She reached out with her mind again, but this time she didn't try to impose control. Instead, she offered something else, memories of her own, the warmth of sunlight on grass, the simple pleasure of a meal shared with friends, the feeling of being safe, being home. The beast stopped, its massive head tilting to one side. For a moment, its aggressive posture relaxed. Then, the facility's automated defense systems kicked in. Tranquilizer darts hissed through the air, striking the creature's flank. It roared in pain and fury. The brief moment of calm shattered as combat programming reasserted control. Maya felt the psychic backlash like a physical blow, but she held on, pouring every ounce of her strength into maintaining the connection. The beast turned toward the security teams pouring into the laboratory, its enhanced muscles coiling for a leap that would carry it into their midst. "Please," Maya whispered, blood running from her nose as the neural strain mounted. "Remember who you were." The facility's emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Maya pressed deeper into the compound, following the psychic trail that burned like acid through her mind. Each step brought waves of Ajax's fury crashing against her consciousness, rage so pure and concentrated it made her teeth ache. Behind her, Colonel Morrison's tactical team moved with practiced precision, their weapons trained on shadows that might hide death. But Maya knew their guns would be useless against what Ajax had become. The genetic enhancements had pushed him beyond the realm of ordinary flesh and bone. "Heat signatures moving toward the main laboratory," whispered Sergeant Chen, checking her scanner. "Whatever it is, it's big." Maya didn't need technology to know where Ajax was headed. She could feel him pulling toward something, drawn by an instinct that went deeper than training or conditioning. The laboratory held answers that Dr. Voss had died trying to protect. They rounded a corner and found the first body. The security guard lay crumpled against the wall, his neck twisted at an impossible angle, blood pooled beneath him, still warm. Maya knelt and placed her hand near the corpse, opening her mind to the psychic residue that clung to violent death. Images flashed through her consciousness, Ajax moving like liquid shadow, faster than human eyes could track. The guard reaching for his weapon, never getting the chance to draw it. Yellow eyes burning with intelligence that shouldn't exist in any natural creature. "Jesus," Morrison breathed, studying the claw marks scored deep into the concrete wall. "What kind of animal?" "He's not an animal anymore," Maya said, rising to her feet. The truth sat heavy in her chest like a stone. Whatever they did to him, it changed him fundamentally. He's something new. Another wave of psychic fury rolled through the facility, strong enough to make Maya stagger. Glass shattered somewhere ahead, the sound sharp and violent in the red-lit corridors. Ajax was close now, so close she could taste his rage like copper on her tongue. They moved through a maze of overturned equipment and scattered papers. Emergency protocols had kicked in too late. The facility's lockdown couldn't contain what Ajax had become. Maya saw evidence of his passage in bent steel doors and walls marked with gouges that spoke of incredible strength. The laboratory door hung twisted off its hinges. Maya peered inside and felt her breath catch. The room had been systematically destroyed, not in mindless fury, but with calculated precision. Computer terminals lay in pieces, their hard drives extracted and crushed. Filing cabinets had been torn apart, their contents scattered across the floor like fallen snow. But it was the smell that made her stomach clench. Blood and chemicals, and something else, something that reminded her of ozone and burning metal. "There," Chen whispered, pointing toward the far corner. Ajax crouched over a bank of servers, his massive form silhouetted against the emergency lighting. He moved with deliberate purpose, using claws like surgical instruments to extract data storage units. Each component he examined briefly before either preserving it carefully or crushing it to powder. Maya watched in fascination and horror. This wasn't the behavior of a rabid animal. Ajax was following some kind of plan, sorting through the facility's research with an intelligence that chilled her to the bone. Morrison raised his rifle, but Maya caught his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Let me try first." Before anyone could stop her, she stepped into the laboratory. Ajax's head snapped around, yellow eyes locking onto hers with laser intensity. Up close, she could see how the genetic modifications had changed him. His skull was broader, accommodating an enlarged brain. His muscles moved beneath fur that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. This wasn't the dog she'd once known. This was evolution accelerated beyond recognition. "Ajax," she said softly, extending her mind toward his. The psychic contact hit her like a physical blow. Ajax's consciousness was a maelstrom of conflicting impulses, military conditioning warring with genetic imperatives, human-taught loyalty battling against something far more primal. But beneath it all, she sensed something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't just intelligent, he was planning. Images flooded through their connection, other facilities, other experiments. Dogs and wolves and creatures she couldn't identify, all undergoing the same horrific transformations. Ajax had accessed the facility's databases not for revenge, but for information. He was gathering intelligence about his own kind. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, understanding flooding through her. "You're not alone, are you?" Ajax's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing fangs that gleamed like polished ivory. When he spoke, his voice was a growl that somehow formed words, words that chilled Maya's soul. "We are Legion." The psychic connection exploded outward, and suddenly Maya could feel them, dozens of enhanced minds scattered across the continent. The military hadn't created just one perfect weapon, they'd created an entire pack, and now that pack was awakening. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the sound of Sarah's boots against concrete as she pushed deeper into the shadows. Her telepathic senses stretched outward like invisible fingers, searching for the chaos that was Titan's mind. The genetic modifications that had turned the German Shepherd into a living weapon had also fractured his consciousness into something barely recognizable as canine. "Easy, girl," Marcus whispered behind her, his rifle trained on the darkness ahead. "Remember, we need him alive if possible." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. After years of hiding her abilities, of pretending to be nothing more than an exceptional dog handler, she was about to expose everything to save a creature that the military considered expendable. But Titan wasn't expendable to her. No dog ever was. A low growl rumbled from the maze of shipping containers ahead. Sarah felt it before she heard it, a wave of confusion, pain, and rage that nearly knocked her to her knees. The genetic cocktail coursing through Titan's veins had amplified not just his physical capabilities, but his emotional responses. Every sensation was magnified tenfold. "He's hurt," she said, steadying herself against a concrete pillar. "The modifications are burning him out from the inside." "All the more reason to put him down quickly," Marcus replied, but his voice carried no conviction. He'd seen what Sarah could do with damaged animals, how she seemed to understand them in ways that defied explanation. Sarah closed her eyes and let her consciousness drift toward Titan's location. The mental contact was like grasping broken glass, sharp, chaotic, and dangerous. Images flashed through the connection: laboratories, needles, pain, handlers who showed no compassion, only fear. The dog's trust in humans had been systematically destroyed, along with his genetic code. A metallic crash echoed through the warehouse as Titan knocked over a stack of equipment. Sarah opened her eyes and moved forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace that felt absurd given the circumstances. But she'd learned long ago that body language translated across species, even telepathically enhanced ones. "I know you can sense me," she said aloud, her voice carrying clearly in the empty space. "I know you remember what it was like before they changed you." Another growl, closer now. Sarah could feel Marcus's tension radiating behind her, his finger hovering over the trigger. She had maybe minutes before his military training overrode his trust in her methods. She pushed deeper into Titan's mind, past the artificial aggression and enhanced predatory instincts. Somewhere beneath the modifications was still a dog, a creature bred for thousands of years to work alongside humans. The genetic tampering hadn't erased that completely. There, a flicker of memory, a young Titan in basic training, tail wagging despite the rigorous conditioning, the joy of successfully completing a mission, the simple pleasure of a handler's approving touch. Sarah grabbed onto those fragments and amplified them, broadcasting them back to him with all the warmth she could muster. Titan's form materialized from behind a shipping container, and Sarah's breath caught. The modifications had transformed him into something that barely resembled a German Shepherd. His musculature had bulked beyond natural proportions, his eyes glowed with an unnatural silver light, and his movements carried a predatory grace that spoke of enhanced reflexes and strength. But it was his mind that truly horrified her. The psychic contact revealed the full extent of what they'd done to him, layers of conditioning designed to strip away everything that made him a companion animal and replace it with pure aggression. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, raising his rifle. "Sarah, get back." "No." The word came out with more authority than Sarah had ever used with Marcus. She took a step forward instead of back, maintaining eye contact with the enhanced animal. "He's still in there." She reached deeper, past the conditioning, past the genetic modifications, down to the core personality that no amount of tampering could completely erase. It was like diving into molten metal. The pain of his transformation, the confusion of his altered state, the desperate loneliness of a pack animal, cut off from any meaningful connection. Sarah poured everything into the contact, her own memories of working with military dogs, her understanding of their loyalty and courage, her grief for what had been done to him. But more than that, she offered him something the laboratories had never provided: unconditional acceptance of what he was, not what they'd tried to make him. Titan stopped advancing. The silver glow in his eyes flickered, and for a moment Sarah glimpsed something heartbreakingly familiar in his expression: recognition, hope. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, and tactical teams flooded the space with shouts and weapon lights. The sudden chaos shattered the delicate connection Sarah had been building. Titan's enhanced instincts kicked in, and he spun toward the new threat with a roar that rattled the building's steel frame. "Stand down," someone shouted over a megaphone. "We have the area surrounded." Sarah felt the moment when Titan's fragile trust snapped completely. The beast within, amplified by genetic modification and triggered by perceived betrayal, took full control. His telepathic signature shifted from confused pain to pure killing intent. And Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she had exactly one chance left to reach him before he became the weapon they'd designed him to be. The containment facility's emergency klaxons had fallen silent, leaving only the steady hum of backup generators and the distant sound of approaching helicopters. Maya knelt beside Ghost in the center of the destroyed lab, her hand resting on his massive flank as his breathing gradually returned to normal. The psychic storm that had nearly torn both their minds apart was subsiding, leaving behind something neither of them had expected: peace. Colonel Reeves stood 20 feet away, his weapon lowered but not holstered. Behind him, a handful of surviving technicians and military personnel watched with a mixture of awe and terror as the most dangerous weapon ever created lay docile beside the woman who had somehow tamed him. "It's over," Maya said, her voice hoarse from the mental strain. She could feel Ghost's consciousness settling into new patterns, the rage and confusion that had driven him to violence finally finding resolution. The genetic modifications that had enhanced his aggression were still there, but now they served a mind at peace rather than one trapped in perpetual torment. Dr. Chen emerged from behind an overturned equipment rack, her tablet clutched in trembling hands. "The neural readings, they're unlike anything we've recorded. Both subjects show complete synchronization of brainwave patterns, but Maya's consciousness appears to be acting as a stabilizing influence." "Subjects?" Maya's eyes flashed dangerously. "We're not your experiments anymore, Doctor." Reeves took a cautious step forward. "What happens now, Sergeant Torres? The brass will want answers. They'll want to know how you did this." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. For years, she'd hidden her abilities, terrified of becoming another lab rat in the military's endless quest for the perfect weapon. But as she felt Ghost's steady presence in her mind, no longer alien and hostile but warm and protective, she realized that some secrets were meant to be shared. "They'll want to replicate it," she said finally, "create more like us." "And would that be such a terrible thing?" Dr. Chen asked, genuine curiosity overriding her earlier fear. "Think of the applications: search and rescue operations, therapy for traumatized veterans, deep space exploration where human-animal partnerships could mean the difference between life and death." Ghost lifted his great head, his amber eyes meeting Maya's. Through their link she felt his thoughts, clearer now than ever before. He showed her images, other dogs like him, trapped in cycles of enhancement and conditioning, their minds fragmenting under the weight of genetic manipulation they couldn't understand. But he also showed her possibilities, partnerships built on understanding rather than domination, enhanced beings who chose their paths rather than having them forced upon them. "There are others," Maya said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "More facilities, more enhanced animals." Reeves nodded grimly. "Project Cerberus extends far beyond this installation. Ghost was just the prototype." The sound of boots on concrete echoed through the damaged laboratory as a team of specialists in hazmat suits entered, followed by officials Maya didn't recognize. She felt Ghost tense beside her, his newly stable mind immediately categorizing the newcomers as potential threats. "Easy," she whispered, both aloud and through their mental link. "We're going to handle this differently." Standing slowly, Maya helped Ghost to his feet. The massive dog moved with fluid grace, no longer the tormented beast that had terrorized the facility just hours before. Together they turned to face the approaching officials. "I'm Dr. Sarah Montgomery from the Department of Enhanced Biological Assets," the lead figure announced, removing her helmet to reveal sharp features and calculating eyes. "I understand we have a breakthrough to discuss." "We have terms," Maya said before anyone else could speak. "If you want our cooperation, if you want to understand what happened here, then things change. No more forced conditioning, no more treating enhanced beings like disposable equipment, and no more hiding behind the excuse that animals can't consent to what you're doing to them." Dr. Montgomery's eyebrows rose. "You're hardly in a position to make demands." Ghost stepped forward, his presence filling the space between Maya and the officials. He didn't growl or show aggression, but the sheer power contained in his enhanced form was unmistakable. More importantly, the intelligence in his eyes was clear. This was no mere animal to be commanded. "Actually," Reeves interjected, "I think they are. What we've witnessed here changes everything. This isn't just about creating better weapons anymore. It's about partnership between enhanced minds." Maya felt a smile tugging at her lips as she sensed other minds at the edge of her awareness, distant but growing stronger. The psychic storm she and Ghost had generated was drawing them in, enhanced animals from facilities across the country beginning to awaken to possibilities they'd never imagined. "The age of secrets is ending," she said, her hand finding the warm fur behind Ghost's ears. "The question is whether you'll be part of the solution or part of the problem." Through the facility's broken windows, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a new day breaking over a world about to change forever.